the Jets are going to be judged by the next two drafts. If you really think about it, Omari, they set themselves up with 5 first-round picks over the next 2 years. Beyond that, if you count second-round picks, they have 8 premium assets, first and second-round picks over the next 2 drafts. It starts at pick 2. It starts with the 4 total picks this year in the top 44. Obviously, how they're positioned to take their big swing at quarterback in all likelihood in 2027 will determine Darren Muji. As much praise as Jet fans are giving him, and I think some of it is certainly deserved, let's remember Joe Douglas was beloved as well. He got rid of Gase, got to pick Salah. All the vibes with JD were super high. He had this historic 2022 draft class. And ultimately, because he got the head coach hire wrong, and the biggest thing, he got the quarterback decision with Zach Wilson, not just wrong, but historically wrong. The Jets are still feeling the effects of all that. So ultimately, while Muji has done a nice job so far, let's not lose sight of the fact, Jet fans, he is going to be judged by the big decisions he makes in these drafts over the next 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think GMs are defined by 2 things: who they ultimately pick at the quarterback, and how they build a roster, or maybe 3 things, and who they decide to be their head coach. And listen, I loved Joe Douglas. I love the way Joe Douglas operated, especially after that first draft, because that first draft was hard. It was COVID. He was coming on late in the draft cycle, didn't really have all the scouts in. So he went for the high ceilings and he failed. So then he course corrected, and I thought that he did much better in 2021. And then in 2022, we already know what happened. GMs, Darren Muji is going to be defined. He's not going to be defined by the Jermaine Johnson for T'Vondre Sweat trade. He's not going to be defined for the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade or the Geno Smith trade. He's going to be defined by who he ultimately selects to be the quarterback going forward. And that's most likely going to happen next year. So, Jake, I agree with everything you said. But one thing, I think the draft for the Jets starts at 16, because at 2, we already know that it's going to be one of the edge rushers. I think that, I think FanDuel has it at -240. That is going to be Arvell Reese. Shout out to Frankie V. Sorry, brother. It's probably going to be Arvell. But yeah, so, and then it starts at 16. What I want to get
that pick right, though, Omari. Like, again,
they do.
We feel like it's going to be we feel like it's going to be Reese, but Bailey ends up being a stud. We're not going to be like, well, the betting favorite was Reese, and they did with the betting favorite. They got to be right with that decision.
That's true. They still have to hit it, but I'm just talking in terms of what we think. Where we're going to really see how Muji is going to treat this draft, it starts at 16. And I would even say, Jake, that it starts at 6 and 7, because if Carnell Tate goes 4th or 5th, I want Darren Muji to be on those phones, because Mekhi Lemon and Jordan Tyson are not going to make it to 16 if Carnell Tate goes 4th, 5th, or even 6th. So I'm looking at Washington at 7. They pick at 7. They pick again at 7 at 71. I'm sure that they want to grab a second round if they could. So let's package 44 and 16 and move up to 7. Maybe throw in the DJ Reed comp pick that you got. That's roughly, I believe it's 140. The comp pick for came out last week, so it's 140. Let's be aggressive. Let's move up. People feel that this is a weaker draft, and the real meat and potatoes of the draft is going to be in rounds 3 and 4. But if you can get 2 immediate contributors, so if I told you that the Jets walked away with an edge rusher, a number 2 receiver, and we'll call it a tight end or a safety, wouldn't you be okay with that? 3 day 1 contributors, and we didn't have to sit back and then mess around and take wide receiver 7 at 16. I think that he should not play it safe, and I think that he's earned enough goodwill from this draft cycle for us to say, okay, maybe we were trying to come away with 4 premium picks, but we did get 2 or 3 immediate contributors. And I think that the way that they've gone about this thing, the Dylan Parham signing, they brought back Max Mitchell, they brought back Xavier Newman. I think that you can take your swings early in this draft because there's not as many blue chip prospects, and then just start to create that talent funnel in some of those positions. Like, start the talent funnel for safety, because Minkah Fitzpatrick is about to be 30. You definitely have to start the linebacker talent funnel, because Demario Davis is probably only going to be here for 1 year, and you want him to kind of groom the next guy that's going to have those green dot responsibilities. So I definitely want to see him be a little bit more aggressive, maneuver around, and just show that acumen that you've shown in the trade market. So I think that you're absolutely right. He has to knock it out of the park, because right now everyone loves him because everyone is out on Glenn, but the chair can get hot really quick. if you start messing around and not really maximizing on the potential of this draft capital that you've acquired.
Yeah, think about it. I mean, this is similar to the Gase Douglas dynamic. Now, I don't think it's going to be, the same way where Mike McCagnon ultimately got fired after the draft. I don't think like we're going to deal with any sort of like crazy firing with Glenn post draft or any sort of thing. But if you think about it, Gase got Douglas the job. Ultimately, Douglas fired Gase because the Jets were horrible, and Douglas got to pick his coach, and it wasn't the right decision. And Robert Saleh, ultimately, we'll see how he does second time around. But we could be looking at a spot where if Muji does well in this draft, but the Jets don't win a ton of games, and their win total is around 5.5 at FanDuel Sportsbook, and we are presented by FanDuel, and here's your latest look at the Jet over-under. It is set at 5.5. If let's say they win 4 games, 5 games, there's that real path where Muji will not only get a chance to have another offseason, but he's going to pick a coach. And at that point, it will all be on him. And if they still don't win, then his feet are held to the fire. But I think what is clear, and if the Francesa report is accurate, Woody believes in Muji more than he believes in Glenn. He's still not going to fire Glenn because he likes him personally, I believe. But clearly, there's some real heat on Aaron Glenn. And I think Muji, trying to help Aaron Glenn, is obviously going to try and get him players that fit what he needs. But now in the draft, that's where you're taking like the bigger picture look at things. And that's where you need Muji to be like, we're not taking David Bailey, who might help us more immediately because he's a more ready pass rusher. No, we might take Arvell Reese because he's only 20 and he's going to develop into a superstar. That's where like the idea of having Muji oversee the big long-term decisions, I feel better about it than if it was just Aaron Glenn trying to make all these moves to save his job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the moves that they've made kind of set the stage for an Arvell Reese because he's 20 years old. We don't want him to come in and be the savior. I don't need him to be honest, Jake, I don't need him to be Micah Parsons. Whatever your ceiling is for Arvell Reese, I don't need him to be Micah Parsons. I don't need him to be Will Anderson. I don't need him to be Myles Garrett. I don't need him to be that day one. You know what I need him to be? I need him to be a young, developing chess piece that is going to hunt favorable matchups. So now that the edges are there, you got Joseph Ossai, you got Kingsley Enagbare, and you still have Will McDonald, who I think is going to be better because he's not going to be asked to play, 75% of the snaps and, trying to set the edge against elite tackles. I think that that's going to help everybody. So now I think collectively they have enough pass rush juice to where sub package, you could have Demario Davis and you could have Arvell Reese playing off ball. You already know who's in our division, Jake. We got 2 unicorns in our division, and Josh Allen, and maybe he hasn't evolved into a full unicorn, but he's on his way. Maybe he's not Charizard yet. He's Charmeleon. Drake May. He's on his way up. For my Pokemon fans out there. So he's evolving into that final stage. But again, you need somebody that's going to be able to hunt those guys. How many times has it been 3rd and 8 or even 3rd and long, and the pass rush doesn't get there, the pockets collapse, those guys take off, and now they just extended another drive? You're not going to be able to do that anymore because we're going to be able to show Arvell Reese in the A gap, and then he can show, and then he can just spy. And then I got my money on Reese getting to the edge or to catch Josh Allen or to catch Drake May. So I think that that's going to allow Arvell Reese to slowly develop. And that's what I truly want to see. I'm tired of drafting guys and then asking them to be the guy day one. That doesn't always happen, no matter where they're picked. I really want this front office to really focus on developing, and not just developing the players, developing the coaches as well too. I thought they did a great job bringing in Chris Banjo. First year on the job, he did phenomenal. I think Tanner would have had more success had he had somebody like Frank Reich to show him the ropes or to, kind of help him with install. So just from a franchise standpoint, I want them all to just start developing players better. Draft some guys with a plan. Draft a day 3 linebacker that has elite traits, but really hasn't put it all together mentally. Pair him up with a Demario Davis. Now you have David Onyemata. So now he can kind of put Devondre Sweat under his wing. Minka Fitzpatrick can tell those guys, hey, listen, these guys, I have a book on these guys, and this is what they like to do. This is how they always try to attack me. So I think that they didn't do that last year. That's why it always shocked me that they never brought in a veteran. Usually, remember when Rex came in, he brought in Marcus Douglas, he brought in Jim Leonard, he brought in Bart Scott. Yep. You have to bring in your guys. Even Saleh always brings in his guys. Look, he got the band back together in Tennessee, and we're making fun of him, but he knows that he has to hit the ground running. And now he has a quarterback this time, so he doesn't really have any excuses. So now there's no excuses. So now we expect more. And the standards need to remain high until they prove to us that they're worthy of being in this position.
I think that's really well said. Hit the like button if you're just tuning in. Omari Brown from U Stadium is our guest. If you tuned in late, a signed Vinny Testaverde jersey is on the line today. Matt Shaw with a super chat. He's in the raffle for 2. If Glenn gets fired, I suggest a new coach get some public relations training before starting. Or how about this for a concept, Matt? They either hire an offensive guy for their quarterback or someone who is proven, so they're not stepping in to the hardest job in sports, you could argue, being the head coach of the Jets, given the playoff drought that you naturally just inherit, even if you had nothing to do with it. They need one or the other, but I hope Glenn figures it out. We could cross that bridge when we get there. But again, getting back to what we opened the show with, it does feel like this idea that, Glenn and Muji, they sink or swim together. They still might. If Muji has a terrible draft, they might just say, let's blow the whole thing up, bring in someone new for a 3 firsts and 27. But I lean with Muji being here and Glenn not being here if they have a bad season. I think it's easier. And we've seen this around the league. Ryan Poles survived in Chicago through multiple coaches. Somehow, Joe Shane, he might not have any power anymore, but he survived with the Giants through multiple coaches. Typically, Joe Douglas, who didn't even get hired by Gase, got hired by Gase. He got to fire Gase and pick his coach. Typically, the GM does get to survive. It's very rare. You have a John Izek situation where Izek gets fired after just 2 years on the job.
Yeah, it's extremely rare. And I think that, I just think that there's a higher chance of Darren Muji lasting through this than it is Aaron Glenn, because you can always go back and say, hey, listen, I didn't even get a chance to even pick my QB. Like we had to go with Justin Fields and now we're going with Geno Smith. So it's just been bridge after bridge. So he's definitely going to get the benefit of the doubt. And he deserves the benefit of the doubt because what Glenn put on paper and on tape wasn't great. And, one thing I will say, Jake, a lot of people say that Glenn needs public relations training or they don't want him to be brash. If that's, I don't know Glenn personally. I don't know if you do, but I don't know Aaron Glenn personally. If that's how you feel, I want you to show up authentically as yourself. And I said this in the space earlier before hopping on with you. Shout out to the commute. I want you to be authentically yourself. Me, I'm a under promise, over deliver type of person. So I'm always going to under promise and then do my best to over deliver. So I'm never going to, attract unwanted attention to myself. But if that's how you operate, that's how you operate. Now, I thought Dan Campbell was a clown when he got up there and talked about biting off kneecaps and, and making sure that, we kick and scratch and things like that. But again, it looked silly in year 1. But now we're in year 5 of Dan Campbell, and it's like, okay, that team matches his intensity. So if that's how Aaron Glenn truly feels, now you have to start backing it up, because now you just kind of look like a clown to the media and to the fans. But I do want him to authentically be himself. So if that's how he feels, that's how I want you to feel. But now I just want the team to echo your sentiments, because the way he acted and the way his football team played, it just didn't line up.
I'll tell you what, I just like the fact that, we're in a spot where there's no excuse for Glenn. He's been given personnel he needs to run his defense. He is running his defense. We can't say we're running the Wilkes defense anymore. He's got a legitimate bridge quarterback who can complete a pass, so the owner can't use that as an excuse when Glenn was the biggest advocate for Fields being signed in the first place. He has an experienced offensive coordinator. At the end of the day, it's, can you coach or not? And he has it's not a perfect roster, but they're about to infuse 4 picks in the top 44 into it. They have enough talent where you could properly evaluate the head coach. And for those saying you couldn't at the end of the year, all right, I'd say they started 0-7 and looked absolutely inept when they had a more talented roster at that time, and it didn't work. Now, put up or shut up, we see what Aaron Glenn could do. Sam Aiken with a super chat. He joins the raffle for 2. Muji walks on water. He screwed the back end of last year's draft. O-line's weakened. He bought us 3 wins at best in free agency. What do you see in this dude? He and Glenn should be tied together. A couple things. Muji's not perfect. And I've said that how they handled day 3 of the draft last year, they need to learn from that because they just lit picks on fire, right? Most notably, Arian Smith, who people thought was a UDFA or a 7th rounder. They took him in the 4th round, and this head coach is scolding the media after he had a few nice plays in a training camp practice about him. So they need to clearly be better on day 3. Let's see if Muji has learned from that. But really, since the end of training camp to now, what moves can you really be critical of from a Muji perspective? The trades they made for Phillips and Briggs were outstanding. The Brownlee deal, just to show people how Muji's really good at assets, he trades a sixth to get Jarvis Brownlee. He gets a seventh back in that deal. He takes the seventh and trades it to the Dolphins to get Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's made top trades as far as maximizing value with Sauce for 2-1s and AD Mitchell being put into that deal. He got the better of the Cowboys or Packers first-round pick in the Quinnen deal in 27 and a much better draft to go with a second-round pick this year. It'd be very tough to be critical of most of Muji's moves, so he doesn't walk on water. Again, the biggest decisions he has to make are in these drafts over the next 2 years, but I think if you're a Jet fan, it's okay to be encouraged and feel like you might have someone competent running the show. And I don't want to just lose that guy if Glenn proves he's not a head coach and this team is terrible. And we feel like, wait a second, do we really need to blow the whole thing up if we have a guy who's had 2 good drafts, let's say, and has shown the ability to be able to maximize his resources and put together the best personnel possible, given the fact no one wants to come play for the Jets right now. So he's had to be creative with ways to get talent into the building.
So listen, first off, Sam, thank you for the super chat. Thanks for listening in, man. Muji does not walk on water. And, Jake's been objectively critical of him and me. I bashed Muji for the way he handled the draft, because last year, Jake, everyone that we trust said that this was a D-line rich draft. Yep. This was the best position of this draft. It's one of the, I think it was the most D-line rich draft of the last 5 years, or something like that, that I was reading. And he didn't take a defensive lineman, and they needed defensive linemen. They needed a run stopper. They needed that run stopper, that plug and play 0 technique, 0 to 1 technique, since Al Woods got hurt and he didn't replace it. So, but again, we talked about their ability to pivot earlier in the show. So their ability to pivot, he realized, hey, listen, I might have messed up and I didn't get the value or the players that we should have gotten. And I thought that the Arian Smith pick was a knee jerk because they allowed Buffalo to take Deion Walker over them. I think that they were going Deion Walker, and then Buffalo jumped them, and then they had to pivot, and they weren't really ready for that. So I give everyone a pass. Douglas took Mekhi Becton over Tristan Wirfs and Jedrick Wills. And listen, guys make mistake with your first year. You maybe don't have all your scouts. Maybe you're not trusting them. So he played it safe. He went with good locker room guys. He went with guys with high floors. He went with guys with, NFL pedigree. Like, you look at Mason Taylor, he's the son of a Hall of Famer. He's the nephew of a Hall of Famer. You look at AZ Thomas, his brother is in the NFL. So you look at Malachi Moore, he's a great locker room guy. So they were trying to surround, they played it safe and tried to get some high character guys. So I think that it's okay to say that he needs to get better. But we can also appreciate how he's moved. Like Jake just called it out there. He made 11 trades. And Jake, I'll put this back on you. Has he really lost the trade yet?
I don't think we could sit here and say he has. I mean, ultimately, we'll determine the success of the Sauce and Quinnen deals based on what they turn the picks into. But as far as just the principle of the deal, did you get great value for the premium asset you dealt? I think without question, you'd have to say yes.
Yeah, so it's okay. Listen, we understand that we're not in the best shape, but it's okay to be excited about these small moves that they make on the margins. I tell people all the time, listen, we have an entire fall, hopefully not this fall, to be miserable. So when we do get these small wins, let's just enjoy them. Let's just enjoy them in the fan base. I understand that there's people out there that want to tank. I understand there's people out there that are completely out on Glenn, but it's not a prerequisite of being a Jets fan to be miserable. We get it. We get it. We're all living it. Guys, I'm almost 40. The last time the team was good, people were buying me shots because I was turning 21. I don't even drink anymore. And that's how long it's been. So we understand it. But guys, we do not have to be miserable any day. If you want to make being a Jets fan your identity, go right ahead. But you don't have to make misery a part of it as well, too. So if our GM is making some shrewd moves and making some good moves, let's clap it up and let's move on. You don't have to say that anybody is, wearing green goggles or we're drinking the green Kool-Aid today just because it's St. Patty's Day. But it's okay. It's okay. I know there's LOL Jets right now, but it's okay to be excited if your GM is making good moves, guys. It's fine. This is how other fan bases live.
You got to be positive when you can be positive, because you're right. It's been tough. I think that's well said.
Trust me.
Hey, We're giving away a Vinny T jersey today on the show. Appreciate all the $10 super chats. I want to get to those, but I do want to give Omari some love here because from one Omari to another, Omari1230 says, Omari to Omari, welcome to the show. We also have some kind words here from the doc. Doc Jeff N says, Omari is an outstanding listen. More, please. I agree. Omari Brown from U Stadium is our guest. If you're watching the show for the first time, make sure you like the video and make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And tune in today. I'm on the radio at 1 o'clock Eastern, which is why we started earlier in the 9 a.m. hour, 1 to 3 on ESPN New York. How about this super chat here from the big fellow? We need to evaluate what Muji does in future drafts, but we also can't dismiss what he did in this past draft. Membu's a stud. He's off to a great start. Love our young talent. Trust in Muji. Yeah, and look, Glenn should get credit for the Armand pick as well. It's not just all the good moves are Muji and all the bad moves are Glenn. But again, now going forward, if Muji has a strong draft and they don't win a ton of games, there is that real scenario where Muji's picking the coach. We don't have to pretend like this is just a made-up fabrication. It's not. I felt that way for a while, and I believe what Mike is saying in his report that we played at the beginning of the show. Mike has been spot on with a lot of things he said over the years. I don't think he's just making it up out of thin air. That's just not how that works. So let's see how they do. But again, and you've been all over this, Omari, 4 picks in the top 44. This is an opportunity to set your franchise up with premium talent. And if you don't go quarterback this year, you're set to add that quarterback next year to a team that is much better positioned to surround the quarterback with the opportunity to actually have success.
Yeah, it's actually cool that you said that. Thanks, big fella. Thanks for listening in, and thanks for the super chat, guys. Keep coming so you can skip the line. So yes, we're going to evaluate what Muji does in the future, but let's break it down. So listen, we all feel that it's a home run with Membu. I think that Membu should have actually got some Offensive Player of the Year votes, and I think that linemen should actually start getting that too, because especially as a tackle, what they're asked to do weekly. Because most teams have 2 really good edges, and sometimes they have a third. You look at Pittsburgh, they have TJ Watt, Highsmith, and then they also have Herbig. So you don't get a week off in the NFL, left or right side. So I think Membu was a home run. He played it safe with Mason Taylor. And I would say, am I the biggest Mason Taylor fan? Right now, I think Mason Taylor is more of a tight end too. But could we truly evaluate what Mason Taylor is with how that offense was running last year? No. A.Z. Thomas came in and he battled. He looked good against that dynamic duo in Cincinnati. Now, granted, Joe Burrow wasn't there, but I thought that he acquitted himself pretty well. Malachi Moore was able to make over $1 million in play incentives because he played a ton of snaps and he looked well. Now, I think that he's best served as a safety 3, but that's still a ton of experience. Now, if we compare Robert Saleh's first year to Aaron Glenn's first year, I thought that Saleh did a good job with guys like Breece Hall, with JFM, with Brandon Eccles, and Bryce Huff. Those are the guys that Saleh developed. And if we can, and it's tough, but we have to search. But if you look for, and even outside of the special teams unit, what Jerron Briggs was able to do, his interior pass rushing skills, I think that should be applauded. Yeah, Malachi Moore, I think that he developed pretty well. You have a starter. And I think that if you look at, and the last one, Jarvis Brownlee. I don't think many people knew who Jarvis Brownlee was, but he came in, that defense started to look a little differently. So I think that Glenn did do a decent job of developing the in-house talent. And I think that we can't listen. We can objectively grade Muji for what he did and still be excited about what he's going to do. So I think that it's very hard, and you have to look. We got to comb through it with a microscope. But there were some guys that took some steps up, and I actually think Joe Tippmann basically solidified himself as a top half of the league guard. I think that we're gonna see Joe Tippmann even take a further leap, and I wouldn't even be surprised if they extend him at some point in training camp, because I think he's a good soldier, and now that play is starting to live up to his draft position.
Now, I wanted to ask you about the draft, because obviously they've improved the roster and they're about to really infuse some big-time talent into the roster with 4 picks in the top 44. As we sit here right now, based on what the Jets have done in free agency, Zach, give us the ideal scenario for how they could use these 4 picks in the top 44.
I'd say, it's cliche, but literally just taking the best players are the ones with the highest ceiling. I don't love going into a draft feeling like you have to draft for a need. And right now it does feel like they need to a little bit with wide receiver, but there are enough good wide receivers. I think they can get away with it. So if you come out of the first round with Arvell, Reese, and like Mekhi Lemon or even Jordan Tyson, I think you feel really good about that. And then those first 2 picks in the second round, maybe you trade back, you pick up another pick. But I think you just load up on talented players, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, premium position, just like really just try and aim and swing for the fences to a little bit, while also getting guys that can contribute right away. Like this is a roster that is desperate for, high level talent that can show it this year. Like they can't really afford to draft projects necessarily. Like you can't. That's why Ty Simpson doesn't make sense to me as a first round pick, because I just don't think they can afford to pick him in the first round and he doesn't play a single snap in his rookie year or whatever. They need to draft guys who are going to contribute this year, while also drafting guys that could be long-term Pro Bowl caliber, cornerstone guys. And so what does that look like? I don't know exactly, but those 4 picks, if you get Arvell, Reese, you get a receiver, and then the other 2 are, I don't know, another pass rusher and a defensive back or something like that, I think you feel pretty good.
If Ty Simpson's there at 33, do you think the Jets would take him?
That's a good question. I'd be tempted. That's where I'm like a little more okay with it, because then you don't feel the pressure to play him, or, you feel a little better about that value. I still don't know for sure. Like maybe that's a spot where they convince somebody to trade up and get him. I don't know what they think about Ty Simpson, because the argument would be if you like him at like 16 to 32 range, like why not trade up and get him or draft him there just plainly? So I don't know. I go back and forth. I lean no, but I could see them taking him at 33, I would say.
It's going to be fascinating. And one more, I know you and Connor Hughes have been reporting on Breece Hall. Sounds like talks are going well to a point where even though they use the tag, is it fair to expect a deal to actually get done before the season starts? What's your level of optimism with a Breece extension?
I think both sides are motivated to get a deal done. I don't think it'll happen anytime soon. I really think Muji likes to focus on this part of the season, on free agency and the draft. And then once you get past that, like that's when you saw him do the Garrett and Sauce contracts last year. So if this happens, I don't think it'll happen until June, July, but I think both sides want a deal. I don't have as much confidence as Connor that it like for sure happens. Like I do see a scenario, I can see a scenario where Breece plays on the tag, but I think ultimately both sides know it's best for both of them if he signs a long-term deal. And the question is like, how high are the Jets willing to go? Like, do you really want to pay, the Kenneth Walker contract, like $15 million a year for a running back? Like that, there's some risk attached to that. But like from Breece's perspective, like why would he accept anything less than that? So it's a really interesting negotiation. And my guess would be that Muji wants to come out of it with a contract that's kind of like the Sauce or Garrett ones, where they're big, but it's not impossible to get out of them after a year or two if you feel like you can get some value there. So I'm sure that's where the impasse is. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have like 100% confidence. I'd say I'm like 60-40 that it gets done before camp.
Hey, here's the deal. Just got no chance unless you click on that like button. And you got to make sure you subscribe to the Jake Asman Show. You don't, you can get the f*** out. Now let's go, Asmaniacs. We're built for this shit.